My friend Takeshi works the night shift cleaning Tokyo Metro train, and he swears this happened on the Yamanote line last October. It was past 2 a.m. when he entered car number 7 of the last train from Shibuya. The car should have been empty, but there she was, sitting perfectly still in the back corner seat. A woman in a white business suit, her long black hair covering her face completely. Takeshi called out, "Excuse me, the train is out of service." No response. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty car. That's when he noticed she wasn't breathing. Her chest was completely still, no rise and fall whatsoever. Takeshi reached out to tap her shoulder. His hand passed right through her. In that moment, she slowly raised her head. Where her face should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin stretching from hairline to neck. Takeshi ran. He didn't stop running until he reached the station. When security checked the camera, car 7 had been empty all night. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. The next morning, they found a white business card on that exact seat. It belonged to a woman named Miyuki Sato, who had thrown herself in front of the Yamanote line exactly 1 year before that night. Takeshi still works the night shift, but he refuses to enter car 7 alone. And sometimes, just sometimes, other workers report seeing a woman in white, still waiting for a train that will never take her home. This story comes from a university student who missed the last train at Shinjuku Station last winter. Kenji was rushing down the stairs when he heard an announcement. Last train to Nakano departing from Platform 0. Platform 0? Kenji had been using this station for 3 years. There was no Platform 0, but he was desperate to get home, so he followed the sign. Down a narrow corridor he'd never seen before. Past flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. The air grew colder with each step. Finally, he reached a platform, but something was wrong. The tiles were old, cracked, covered in what looked like decades of grime. And the other passengers, they were all wearing clothes from different decades. 1950s business suit, 1970s school uniform, 1980s fashion. None of them were moving. They just stood there, staring at the tracks with vacant eyes. When the train arrived, Kenji's blood turned to ice. It was an old model, one that hadn't run in Tokyo for 40 years. The doors opened with a rusty screech. One by one, the passengers filed in, completely silent. A conductor appeared, his uniform faded and torn. He looked directly at Kenji and smiled, revealing a mouthful of blackened teeth. "All aboard the Eternal Line." Kenji ran. He ran back through that narrow corridor, up the stairs, and out of the station. The next day, he asked station staff about Platform 0. They looked at him strangely and said, "There's never been a Platform 0 at Shinjuku." But sometimes, late at night, passengers still report hearing that announcement, calling them to a platform that shouldn't exist, for a train that travels to nowhere at all. Every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., an unscheduled train runs through Ikebukuro Station. The station workers know about it, but they pretend it doesn't exist. My cousin Yuki learned about this train the hard way. She was working late at her office job, staying until nearly 4 a.m. to finish a presentation. Exhausted, she stumbled into Ikebukuro Station just as the clock struck 3:33. The station was completely empty, eerily quiet. Then she heard it, the distant rumble of an approaching train. Strange, she thought. The last train had departed hours ago, but there it was, sliding into the station with unusual silence. No screeching brakes, no mechanical sounds, just a ghostly whisper along the track. The doors opened, revealing a car filled with passengers. But these weren't ordinary commuters. They all sat perfectly still, their heads bowed as if sleeping. Every single one wore a white surgical mask. Yuki hesitated, but she needed to get home. She stepped aboard and took a seat near the door. As the train began to move, she noticed something horrifying. The masks weren't hiding faces. They were covering empty sockets where faces should have been. The train wasn't following the normal route either. It traveled through tunnels she'd never seen before, deeper and deeper underground. The air grew thick and suffocating. Suddenly, all the passengers turned their heads toward her in unison. Behind those white masks, nothing but darkness. Yuki pressed the emergency button frantically. The train screeched to a halt, and she bolted through the opening door. She found herself back on the platform at Ikebukuro. But now it was 6 a.m., and the morning commuters were arriving. Yuki had lost 3 hours, with no memory of how. She never stays at the office past 3:30 a.m. anymore, because she knows the 3:33 express is still running, waiting to take passengers on a journey they'll never remember, to a destination that exists only in the space between seconds. Station Master Watanabe has worked the Chuo line for 37 years, and he's never told anyone this story until now. It happened during the Great Earthquake of 2011. The trains had stopped running, and Watanabe was doing a final safety check in the tunnel. That's when he heard the announcement echoing through the empty station. Last train departing in 2 minutes. All passengers please board immediately. Impossible. All trains had been suspended hours ago due to the earthquake damage. Watanabe rushed to the platform to investigate. There, standing at the microphone, was conductor Yamamoto, who had died in a train accident 15 years earlier. Yamamoto looked exactly as he had on his last day of work. Same uniform, same serious expression, same dedication to his duty. But his skin was pale as moonlight, and his eyes held a sadness deeper than any tunnel. "Yamamoto-san?" Watanabe whispered. The ghostly conductor turned and smiled sadly. "Watanabe-kun, I'm sorry for the confusion. The trains aren't running tonight." Yamamoto nodded slowly. "I know, but some passengers are still waiting." That's when Watanabe noticed them. Dozens of translucent figures standing patiently on the platform. Men in business suits from decades past. Women in traditional kimono. Children in old-fashioned school uniforms. All of them victims of railway accidents spanning the line's entire history. "They've been waiting so long to go home," Yamamoto explained. "But I can never seem to find the right train for them." As Watanabe watched, a phantom train materialized on the track, its cars filled with a soft, warm light. One by one, the waiting spirits boarded eagerly. Yamamoto gave his final announcement, "Thank you for riding with us today." As the phantom train departed, Yamamoto began to fade away, but not before whispering to Watanabe, Tell them we always get our passengers home safe." Watanabe never saw Yamamoto again, but sometimes during delays or emergencies, he hears that familiar voice on the intercom, making sure every passenger gets home safe. Even in death, a conductor's duty never ends. This final story happened to my neighbor's daughter just last month, and she still won't take the subway alone. May was returning from a late study session at the library in Shibuya. She boarded the familiar Hibiya line train around midnight, exhausted and half asleep. The car was nearly empty, just an old man reading a newspaper and a woman in a nurse's uniform. May settled into a seat and closed her eyes, counting the stops in her head. But when she opened them again, the train was still moving, and she'd passed her stop somehow. Confused, she looked at the route map above the door, but the stations listed weren't familiar. Names like Yamizaka and Shinikawa and Ketsueki-cho. She'd never heard of any of these places. The announcement came, "Next stop Yokai Machi, Yokai Machi, next stop." May's blood ran cold. Yokai Machi meant Monster Town. She looked around the car desperately. The old man was still reading his newspaper. The pages were blank. The nurse was still sitting quietly, but her uniform was stained with something dark. And there were other passengers now. Passengers who definitely hadn't been there before. A businessman with too many arms. A schoolgirl whose head was turned completely backward. An elderly woman whose mouth stretched from ear to ear in an impossible smile. They were all staring at her now. The train began to slow down as it approached Yokai Machi Station. Through the window, May could see a platform lit by flickering lanterns, and waiting on that platform were creatures from her worst nightmare. The businessman with too many arms stood up and smiled at her. "This is your stop, isn't it?" he asked in a voice like grinding metal. May shook her head frantically and pressed her eyes shut. "I want to go home," she whispered. "Please, I just want to go home." When she opened her eyes, she was back on the normal Hibiya line, approaching her usual stop. The car was empty now except for her, but on the seat across from her, someone had left a single ticket stub. Destination Yokai Machi. May keeps that ticket in her wallet as a reminder that sometimes the trains we board in Tokyo's underground don't always travel to places that exist in our world.